Welcome tonight. It's March what? 21st. Wow. March 21st. Tomorrow is March 22nd. My mother's 88th birthday, although she's not around to celebrate it, but tomorrow she would be 88. So welcome everybody. We're going to talk about epiphanies. One of those great big words, epiphanies, you know, like. And I want to talk about it because it is a big word and an important thing. And I don't usually write a lecture, but I realized while I was preparing this that I am going to like this. So I wrote it so that I can do it again in the future. And it came up, it came up because a couple of weeks ago, somebody in acting class said we were just doing that little talk we sometimes do between renditions, and the person said, you know, I had kind of an epiphany about my work this week. And I then said, really, I'm always interested in epiphanies, so please explain. And this woman told the story of a little thing that she'd come to realize about rehearsal and preparation that really was a changed attitude for her about what was necessary in terms of preparing something. And I could tell it was epiphanous, if there is such an adjective, that it really had been a shift and a change in her. And I began to then, began to circulate this idea of epiphany. And I remembered something that was one of the great, you know how sometimes things happen in life that nobody intends to be funny, and they for some reason are so supremely funny, and you have to bite your lip because you can't laugh at them because they meant it, and yet it is so funny. So there was this guy named David in class, and David was a very sort of groomed kind of handsome guy. And I think David was a touch shorter than he thought you needed to be a truly handsome guy. And he sort of like Robert Downey Jr., you know, who is a really nice-looking fella, but he's 5'3". So, you know, he's got that, like he isn't 5'3", but he's a smaller guy. I think he's 5'5" or 5'6". But he's, you know, he's got that kind of filling up more space because, you know, he thinks he needs to. And he fills it pretty well. Anyway, David was kind of that kind of a fella. And he was also a high-end real estate salesperson, as well as an actor. And you could totally see why he was a successful real estate guy, because he had all this slick kind of, let me show you the, you know. And he was doing well as a real estate guy. And so he was in acting class, and one day he came, and he was doing fine in class, and he was a talented fellow. And sometimes his acting would be a little sales pitchy. It would be a little more like he was selling the piece as a piece of property than he was actually in the character. So that was kind of my job, to get him off of selling the audience and more into living and being human in front of them. And we were moving along well in that regard. He'd been in class for a couple of months. And so he came this one particular week, and it was a Wednesday daytime class. It's firmly in my mind, and this has probably been 10 or 12 years ago now. And he got up, and he was, I could tell, feeling this big, he wanted to thank me. The work had finally sort of connected and sunk in. So he sort of, before he worked, said, I really want to say something to you and to the class about, and he proceeded to talk about the movement in his work and that it was gratifying. And then he said, and this week alone, this week, I've had 4 epiphanies. Now, I had to bite my lip. Because, you know, you don't have multiple epiphanies. It's like, you know, you know, epiphanies are life-changing, special moments. You don't have many in any given week. But of course, he's such a salesman that he couldn't just say, I had an epiphany. He had to have multiple epiphanies. So, and I'm like biting my lip because he was sincere. And I didn't want to laugh at him, but it was just, you know, it was so funny. It's like, oh, you know, I had 3 or 4 miracles this morning. No, I didn't think so. You know, so I began thinking about David, and I realized that I had this attitude about how exclusive and special an Epiphany needed to be, and maybe I was wrong. Maybe you could have 3 or 4 of them. I don't know. So I thought I'd better, you know, and I started exploring this myself, and then it was time for the topic, because Ken always buzzes me and goes, have to get out the thing, you better pick a topic. So I thought, Epiphanies. We're going to do a thing about Epiphanies. So here we are. We're epiphanizing together tonight. So I think these are such vital and important parts of our lives where there are these sea changes, these things where things really shift in our lives. Now sometimes they're attached to a big shift. We get married, you know, or we have a baby, and of course that's going to be life-changing. But we also have these little things that don't involve a big event. They don't, and yet we are forever shifted by some moment or something that happens. And that's the thing I wanted to look at and talk about and define for you. The first thing, when I, this is problematical. Oh, there are my glasses. Good. I need to be able to read my notes. I started out with the Epiphany thing in the way I always do. Because I had written to you in a little announcement about tonight, I'd asked some questions like, can we make these moments happen? Can we stop them from happening? Sometimes we have these epiphanies we wish we didn't have, you know. We yearn for them, and they elude us, and then when we least expect them, here they come, and there's this little change. So I posed all these kind of statements and questions in the email that we sent. And then I thought, okay, now I have to answer these questions, and I really have to look at this. And as I said before, I began where I always do, because I'm so word-oriented and attracted, as you might guess from having done the course. So I first looked at the definition. And there were 2 of 4 that interested me and had to do with us. The first one was an epiphany, an appearance or manifestation, especially of a deity. We see the Lord, we see Buddha, you know, we see the universe. We have that moment of recognition of something or all that is larger than we are. That's an epiphany. The second version was a sudden, intuitive perception or insight into the reality of the essential meaning of something, usually initiated by some simple, homely, or commonplace occurrence or experience. That's the one I want to talk most about. But I want to go back to the appearance of a deity, because the next thing I always do after I look at the definition of something and try to begin to conceptualize how this word got to be and what it represents, the next thing I always do is look at what people have said about it. And Epiphany, having to do with this manifestation of a deity, a wonderful Australian actress named Pamela Stephenson that some of you may be aware of. She's a terrific actress. Pamela Stephenson was quoted as saying this about Epiphany: the notion of a contemporary and personal epiphany is, to me, very exciting, because it's sort of a biblical thing. It's something that has happened to people in other centuries or in the context of religious experience, but here it is, happening to you. A miracle of a moment, and it happens to any of us and almost at any time. And that's how, I don't know how they've been for you, but there have been these moments of the appearance of an idea or a thought or a new way of doing something, and it's been almost like holy.